Good morning. Your Holiness, the last 3 days have been a feast both for the mind and the brain. And as a scientist, I can say that even though it was just a brief glimpse, a very tiny glimpse of our rich traditions, I was just overwhelmed by the richness of the tradition and the knowledge that we need to, as yet, as scientists, explore and understand. Just to briefly recapitulate what we have done in the last 4 sessions, the meeting started out with laying down the traditions of Hindu and Buddhist philosophy as articulated by Swami Atmapriyananda and Jumpala, and it was followed by Ramprasad Chakravarti elucidating the challenges that we scientists face as we initiate this dialogue. In the second session, we unfolded the story of the wonderful collaboration that actually overcame some of the challenges that Ramprasad initially discussed by the presentations from Richie Davidson and Matthew Ricard. This was followed by the brief presentations by Swamiji and Ramprasad on the Advaita Vedanta traditions and the practices. And yesterday, of course, in the afternoon, we heard the Jain practice, the Preksha meditation, and the yoga practices, and some of the studies that have been done in India by Shirley Tellis, Nagendraji, and of course, briefly, Dr. Gangadhar's work also on this yoga practices in the treatment of mental illnesses was presented by Richie Davidson, since Gangadhar could not be here. We now are assembled here today for the last session. In this session, Your Holiness, we will be reflecting, integrating, and discussing about the future directions that we need to take this meeting and this dialogue to. Personally, interacting with the scientists who have been here during this meeting, it was very evident that there is a tremendous interest from the scientific community into engage in these dialogues. But Your Holiness, without your support and your involvement, this dialogue would not continue. You have not only been a catalyst, you have held us together, and we will continue to need your presence and your involvement and have several such dialogues with the Indian scientists if we truly have to not lose the momentum of this initiative and move this forward. We have wasted enough time in the last few decades that we have not done this, but now that we have started, I seek your help in moving this forward. In terms of future directions, one of the other things that came to my mind was the Mind Life Institute has shown us a successful model of such dialogues and interaction. It would be very helpful if some Indian scientists could attend summer research institutes that the Mind Life conducts every year. I understand the financial constraints that such an endeavor would involve, but I'm hoping that we will be able to overcome this. I always feel that it is important to identify the goal, and once that goal is identified, the path to the goal, will automatically unfold itself, and we'll find the resources and the means to do it. The last thing, of course, was that I also hope that soon we would be able to initiate these summer research institutes in India and bring together people. It's only through continuous dialogue and interaction that we can hope to build this kind of intimate collaboration and conversation between the two domains, namely the contemplatives and the scientific traditions. With these few words, I would first like to introduce our panel. First and foremost, Dr. Kapila Vatsyayan, Kapila ji, as we all fondly call her. It is very hard to describe. She's a scholar, an author, a linguist, a dancer, an ethnographer, an educationist, an art historian, and a cultural policy maker. But to us, she's dear Kapila ji. I just feel she's a resource of knowledge, and we have tried very hard to bring her here because I think it would be wonderful to hear and share what you think about this meeting. Dr. Wolfsinger, on the far right, I'm a left-hander and I'm always confusing my right and left hands, so pardon me. He's the president of the Max Planck Institute of Brain Research, and all of us have heard about him. And to my left again is Professor Ramurthy. Professor Ramurthy is a nuclear scientist, a renowned nuclear scientist, who for 12 years headed the Department of Science and Technology of the Ministry of Science and Technology for the Government of India. He has been instrumental in setting out several policies, radically new policies to foster science and technology in India. And currently, he's the director of the National Institute of Advanced Sciences in Bangalore. And I've been interacting with him ever since this initiative has been being planned, and he's been a great source of support and encouragement. And I look up to him to give us directions on how to take this forward in the Indian context. To my right is Richie Davidson, professor from Madison, whom you all know, and Matthew Ricard, as he's known as the photographer, the biochemist, molecular biologist, the Buddhist monk. So with these introductions, I would now like to request Kapilaji to share some of her reflections with us.
Your Holiness, you have called me mother for many decades. You have also said that the Tibetan tradition and you are chela of India. You have also said, both privately and publicly, that the chela has done much better than the guru. Now, since you are my chela, and you have done much better than either the mother or the guru, so I suggest that the son, the chela, speaks and the mother keeps quiet. Which is, whether you call it an Indian or you call it a universal tradition, once, wherever knowledge has been transmitted, and experience has been transmitted and known, then that experience must come from one who has been on this journey, both physical and spiritual, as I have known you, little that I have known you, for the long time that I have known you. And I think this audience would like to hear you rather than my squeaky voice. Your Holiness, before I request you to speak, I do wish to place before you not any kind of a summary which Vijay has already given you, but whether from this discussion or from discussions not in confined space of a country or a tradition, the questions which the human mind has asked is about the existential reality, both external and more internal. And at that level, I think that any discussion or dialogue between what the human mind has divided into disciplines, because this is the division of the human mind in terms of considering that these are distinct disciplines. So my first question to you, Your Holiness, is that what is that moment from that undivided moment or that holistic moment, a word that you have used so many times, that division takes place. My second question is that our discussions here have been at, as I see it, from my very little understanding and colossal ignorance, is that the discussions have moved on different planes. The discussions have moved on the plane of, first and foremost, what is this body? How do you... And that body which has a substance or an entity we called the brain, and that brain is responsible, or is it the igniter, or container, or articulator of something which civilizations and cultures have addressed themselves to in terms of A, experience, and B, articulation in language. And what is that process? And does science then address itself to that moment or that process where the brain is the receptacle of the mind? I think this is the basic. And discussions, both at the empirical level of science and at the philosophic level, have occupied humanity for centuries, ever since the human being. My second question to you is, judging from the kind of presentations that we had, and as I said, it moved on many levels, was a scientific, what we call science, and I have a definitional problem on the word science in the English language, coming as it does from its etymology, from the Latin and the Greek source, which means cutting, which means dissection. And all other words in the traditions that we are speaking about, where it does not speak of dissection, it speaks of a holistic and a total comprehension. And that therefore, my second question is that Your Holiness, this whole endeavor, wonderful as it is, then when it comes into this, it is a question of the division that we spoke about in philosophic systems. And therefore, we spent wonderful time and we learned so much from different philosophic systems. And I want to make a distinction here between philosophic systems and religious entities. And I think that we got a little this way, that way, as I say, as a dancer, between institutional religion and philosophic systems. And this came up repeatedly about religious denominations. And I think that that distinction has to be kept quite clear. Because the institutions of religion, whether in the West or the East or something, have a different complexion, and I think that our discussions have to stay clear. And therefore, my last question, before I request the very final, is when you speak about the secular ethics, which you have done so much, Secularism, again, the English word secular has many problems. It is culturally framed. It is historically framed. It is not a fundamental category at all. And therefore, in the cultural context, again, in these Indian traditions, there isn't a distinction of that kind which we are making either, and I now speak in my little capacity as also a parliamentarian, or the Constitution of India, because the word secular has certain, in the cultural context, it has both problems and I'd like you to reflect. And finally, most of all, we've all spoken, we've heard, and both at the level of experience and at the level of articulation, but we haven't heard you, Your Holiness, to tell us about the Nalanda tradition, which is where this dialogue started. And as you know, I don't have to tell you that is where the Chela became the Guru. And that is where Nagarjuna and Yogacharya and so I'm sure that this audience would like to hear you on the Nagarjuna tradition. And pardon the mother for speaking too much as usual. Thank you.
What is I'm sorry, in order to understand it well.
Fully,
no?
secular ethics kanang yorwas tati nega chimbure shazine secular se de chikdi inji chikdi nyongsa shojores ko rishun da thurab da mambuji da dewa de jinsa jaga nalo ya jaga bena tadimle de peju cheyorde yine da nyokto yores kunan ko dalya de tole ko kongse karyo na kan shu tamade kada nalanda ko
So, thank you, Mataji. Your comment about secularism. Usually, I have my own sort of understanding about secularism. So now your explanation creates a little shaky. So I really see now my understanding about secularism just seems only half or something very rough. I don't know. So in any way, Mataji said, my commitment about promotion of secularism is no change. Till my death, I will commit it. So indeed, our last few days, I think our dialogue with scientists, now this sort of occasion, something become very unique, very good. As I mentioned yesterday, this really now shows the supermarket of different sort of philosophy, different sort of traditions, spiritual traditions. So really wonderful. And also I mentioned this also may create more confusion. So therefore, also it is necessary to know the differences. So now Mataji, although this morning I felt, maybe if it's appropriate occasion come, I may explain about the basic sort of system of the Nalanda thinking. So now you perhaps more like that.
Solon was saying that maybe you are clairvoyant.
I thought of this in this way.
So now, my long-time friend and very, very intellectual and also dedicated, never married, isn't it?
No, I did.
You really? And then, you see, she really devoted taking care of your own mother, isn't it? Wonderful lady, wonderful lady. So I usually describe Mataji. So now, very briefly, the presentation of when I say Nalanda tradition, what is that? What is the meaning? I think firstly, the Buddha's statement, "O my follower, bhikshus and others should not accept my teaching out of faith and out of devotion, but rather your own investigation and experiment." That's
So
I think this translation may be better.
In fact, the citation runs as follows. Just as a goldsmith examines the quality of the gold through a process of cutting, burning, and so on, in the same manner, bhikshus, they should examine my words, subject them to critical examination and also personal experiment, and on that basis, accept their validity.
So that gives his follower liberty to examine even his own word, his own teaching. That's why
So therefore, the tradition evolved in Nalanda tradition, the hermeneutic approach of interpreting among the statements those that are provisional and those that are definitive.
And also, I think one of the key sort of concept in Buddhism is
And also the need to avoid misconceptions leading to nihilism, in the form of nihilism, or in the form of absolutism.
nihilism
No.
nihilism is quite
Although the word nihilism might be understood in so many different ways, but the basic point is that any assertions that deny what is actually real, that is one form of extreme. And any assertions that claim reality of something that does not exist, that is also another form of extremism.
So that's why it becomes important investigation, thorough investigation and experiment. So that's, I think, tradition of Buddhism in general, and particularly Nalanda tradition. So this also, I think, tell us entire sentient being want happiness, satisfaction, joyfulness. And all these goals come from action, not just accidentally. Everything is due to its own causes and conditions. So here, related with sentient being, action is the key factor. That we call karma. So the action should be realistic action. Even if you want to hit someone, your method should be realistic. So through realistic approach, you get what you want. Unrealistic method fail, bring satisfactory result. I think one recent sort of example, both Saddam Hussein's sort of policy and of course I have great admiration or love former sort of president, the Bush. As a human being, very wonderful person. But you see, his approach, I think the motivation is good to eliminate dictatorship and bring democracy, freedom. But method, unrealistic method. Both sides, I think unrealistic method. So failed. So even you see making one, also the delicious tea, the approach must be realistic. Just your wishful thinking will not bring taste feel because of tea. You need certain amount of water and some other tea leaf and sugar, milk, everything should be realistic. So every sort of thing, even if it's walking, must be realistic. Otherwise you may fail. So everything should be realistic. Now, including the transformation of our mind also must be realistic. So therefore, again, you see, investigation come important. And then on top of that, we must utilize, in order to know the reality, all different angles. Through one dimension, through one angle, we cannot get the full awareness about the reality. So we must look the reality through all sort of angles and all sort of dimensions. So holistic approach is important. That's why the concept of interdependency is come. Reality, everything interdependent. So in order to get more, the realistic approach, realistic look, we need more sort of wider perspective. So that is come the Buddhist idea of Patitsamuppad, interdependence. Patitsamuppad, interdependency. So then, since realistic approach is important in any field, including Dharma practice, so the importance of logic comes. Seme shungne 참아 된데부스다 내베 디기 패질 문주 디기네 더도 내리 디기 바디디 세면 되버리셔야 돼요.
For example, in the classical Indian Pramana texts, the text on epistemology, a statement is made that in actual fact, all the successful outcomes in our life, including in the immediate term up to the highest achievement of nirvana, all of these successful outcomes are in one way or another fruits of a knowledge, valid cognition, a praman.
So now, in Nalanda sort of institution, one well-known sort of very really smart-minded sort of leader or professor of Nalanda, Nagarjuna, my favorite guru. And his main disciple, Aryadeva. 딱 디싱인데죠. 나가르존하기 디송브레. 아니 만주다 데베 디기라 네국 디기직 띵만두 디기. 터두기 디기직 띵엘리기 디기. 니송샤.
So Nagarjuna in one of his texts speaks of, in terms of our object of aspiration, there's the immediate object of aspiration, and then the final or long-term aspect of aspiration. The immediate object of aspiration is seeking excellence or worldly existence, and then the ultimate aim of existence, object of aspiration, is the spiritual freedom, liberation.
디 룹탑 디 소년디 아리안 대회 수남 멤버 탐군도 바로 다는다고 그렇지. 탐을 다시 군다고 디지털이 캐바인지. 송샤베 디르샤.
So now, given that these are our objects of aspiration, one is the happiness in the kind of immediate term, the other one is the ultimate happiness of moksha or liberation, then we find in Aryadeva's text writing quite a succinct presentation of the method of how to go about achieving these two aims or goals. And there he talks about how on the initial stage, the individual must refrain from all destructive actions, non-virtuous actions. Secondly, on the second stage, the individual must restrain from grasping onto the notion of strong self. And then, and then finally, in the final stage, the individual must let go of grasping onto any forms of distorted views.
So now first level, 먼저 디기를 치명원도당 센딩 먼저 디기 니 배치치죠.
So now with relation to the first aim, which is the immediate term, happiness, there, within the classical Indian tradition, we can speak of, again, two levels. One is the immediate happiness in this life, and the second one is the happiness in the future life.
Now here, the importance of secular ethics, no matter whether believer or non-believer, so long anyone who wants happy life, happy community. So now here, the secular ethics related, in order to gain happy life, this very life. And that also the basis of preparation for the happiness,
So in also, establishing happiness in this life also becomes the basis for having a better life in future as well.
secular ethic
Sorry, the secular ethics, which is the method by which we seek happiness in this life can also be seen as the very same method that can lead to happiness in the future life as well.
I think our dialogue with scientists, I think mainly related with that level. We are not talking about next life. But you see, once we develop meaningful life, and not only happy day by day, but also, you see, that creates positive ground for a good next life. Even you see the concept of heaven, this life's conduct, positive conduct, with principle of moral ethics, is the basis because of the method to reach heaven, isn't it? So that's why all religious tradition is talking loving kindness, forgiveness, tolerance, self-discipline, all these things happen. So that's one level. 랑거시베 되나라 태포 먹고 송되기도 와 태포 먹고 송되면 난기 안 되디 셈이 태포서 차죠.
So, for example, in Lanka Avatara Sutra, which is a descent to Lanka Sutra, there is a reference to many vehicles, spiritual vehicles. And so one vehicle that is referred to is the vehicle of the humans. And so the secular ethics can be seen as being constituted by that.
Now about the happiness or joyful life in future. Again, main thing is the restrain harming other. That's the main thing. As the non-religious study. Right.
As we pointed out in Aryadeva's text. Yeah.
I mean, the non-virtues act like 10 non-virtues, obviously. That also is the common, all religion. Even you see, according to law, also you see these are considered because of the wrong thing. Killing, whether believer or non-believer, must restrain killing. Then stealing. If we commit that, you see, we have to go to jail. Then sexual misconduct or abuse, rapes like this. Also, you see, even the ordinary law is because of the wrong thing. Then telling lie.
Divisive speech,
직접,
harsh words,
맞게,
a kind of frivolous, senseless gossip.
and also you see, I think main 맞게 the 차단권을 나오지 폐지 더더지었다.
So the senseless gossip that is being referred to here is the one that is motivated by strong forms of attachment and aversion and hostility.
So these, if you use common sense, these are wrong. So not religious sort of practice. It's common sense. These are harmful to oneself, to the family, to the sort of society, like that. Then napsim lokta.
Then covetousness, harmful intention, wrong views.
Wrong view now according one's own sort of view, religious sort of view. Yes, you can say, you can have, the lokta.
So here, wrong view, how you define something to be wrong view may differ according to one's own philosophical standpoints.
So then, the Buddha state, the suffering, in suffering, dukkha, 3 levels. Suffering of change.
And conditioned, suffering of conditioning.
So now this mainly deal with first level of suffering. Now second level of suffering, which worldly sort of pleasure, essentially suffering nature. So now in order to overcome that, now practice of samadhi now involved. Some 띵인징, 다 삼된 검니, 다 삼된 루자네 감공기, 간다지, 다 심기한테 처기하래. 그래서 디기 되베 니미때, 아니 감공기, 단 되베 분소디들이 미심지기, 단 유에 동엘이야, 그걸로 인중에 타네, 다 감공기, 다 삼대 시베인지, 소 땅용, 다 텐두니니 띵인지 고민기야래. 대단들의 시락 나바지 항도 고민기야래. 다 디기 상배해봐서 시야.
So
교회 동에 보도 써야다. 동에다 아장장한테 교회 동에 리식문주 원고네.
So we find in the classical Indian tradition practices that are aimed at cultivating states of samadhi or dhyana, which are heightened states of concentration, and these are states referred to as mental states, transcending the realm of desire. So they are form and formless realms, and these kind of states are achieved on the basis of really cultivating a sense of disillusionment from the sensory world of desire, everyday experience of desire and pleasure, and then moving beyond the spectrum of pain and pleasure, particularly pleasure kind of domination, and moving even to the state of kind of a neutrality. And these are referred to as form and formless states, which transcend even the dimension of kind of sensations and feeling.
That's Shilasundri.
So, and part of that process involves application of a combination of both single-pointed
The method.
Method involves single-pointed triangle abiding on the one hand, and also more analytic, comparative kind of perspectives and insight approach on the other.
A Sanskrit word we call samadhi and vipassana.
Vipassana.
This is also common to all Indian tradition. So yesterday, you see, we already used to discuss these things. And now, the
So then we spoke about the ultimate aim of the aspirant is the moksha, the liberation.
랑니 소소탈 세하게 랑니다 가서 그게 동행이 주세베 땐도 대회 내글지라 탈바체 다 랑니 주고 뭐임바 심지어 타예바 다 동행래 탈외 내글지 탄도 녀외 딘데기 다 탈바샤 인자네 니헬릭 탐실점에 고바.
So with this state of moksha, liberation is really understood as a state of mind where the individual, through the process of the practice, have attained a total freedom from all the afflictions and also the roots of the afflictions, and including the suffering, which is the fruits of the afflictions. And so that is moksha and liberation. But when that liberation is sought in the context of a universal liberation, a liberation for all beings, and that highest level of liberation is referred to as the full awakening
Buddhahood.
or Buddhahood.
당연히 니샤인데 당연히 당고도 줘야 돼. 바로 다는다고 주셔야 돼.
So within these two levels of liberation, one is the individual, the other one is the more universal. The restraining from grasping onto self is seen as the key path for attaining the individual liberation.
다들 다음에 따와서 나보상이 좀더 지음을 송돼야 되다. 다 하고 우매슝네 송돼야 되다. 다음에 따와야 돼.
So here, there's a very important role for the Buddhist understanding of the teachings on no self, anatma, in general, and particularly the way in which anatman, no self teaching, is understood according to the Madhyamaka tradition.
다 다 되게 문도 두야 돼 넬리 두야 니가 로디 텐진 레벨 중에 따와지 터네 용되도.
So, in brief, the attainment of both these aspirations, the short-term aspiration of happiness and the long-term aspiration of spiritual freedom, both of these are really dependent upon cultivating an outlook, philosophical outlook that is based on appreciation of the interdependence of everything. Pratitya samubhata.
균대기 땡중 따야타네 렌데랑도래.
So, for example, it is on the basis of understanding and incorporating the view of dependent origination in terms of cause and effect relations, then the deeper understanding of the law of karma comes, which then helps one restrain from negative actions and lead an ethical life.
I mean, logically, any sort of negative thing which we do not want, that also come due to its own causes conditions. So since we do not want that result, so we must avoid the causes conditions of that. Between causes and the condition, cause are main sort of the cause factor. So if you restrain, create cause, then even conditions there, it may not create the negative result. So positive also is as well. So now our work actually on a secular sort of basis, the scientific sort of research now showing more compassionate mind, more calm mind, immense benefit to one's own health, and also you see the immense benefit to the more peaceful society. All these disturbances ultimately come from mind, come from emotion. So dealing with emotion is the ultimate sort of method to reduce these unhappy events. It cannot eliminate these unhealthy things by force. Former Soviet Union, I think, utilized as a maximum way, and also the peoples of China and also North Korea, I think, use the right method, but full of corruptions. So self-discipline. Self-discipline comes only once you see the result or benefit. If I restrain harming sort of the action, I get benefit. If I do harming sort of action, ultimately I will suffer. Out of understanding that, then self-discipline comes. So everybody say selfish. That's, but I usually call selfish should be wise selfish rather than foolish selfish. Due to lack of the fact, lack of sort of lack of the understanding of the fact, and we all carry unrealistic method. Through that is the selfish, blind selfish, foolish selfish. Knowing the reality and the long-term interest, then sometimes it need a little sacrifice for immediate sort of interest in order to gain long-term permanent happiness. So then second level, in order to remove the self-grasping sort of the wrong view. Now here you see we have some differences. My spiritual brother, non-Buddhist, now the question of view of self, sort of independent, even though it's a small self or big self, still that big self there. So the individual small self completely dissolved in the big self. The big self still there. So it might develop attachment towards that big soul, big self. So we must, you see, develop the selfless on all levels. So that is the Nalanda sort of master sort of viewpoint. So in any way, now, Tindegi, the Zimba, the Seya, the wrong view, the Seya, the right view, Karislavna, Yundegi Tinjung says, you ever in Devu the Julaten the Yari, Tinde Yindu, Devu Tungem, Minduba, the Deodeva Yindu, Didu, Jutela, Langdor Chavaresa, Dishe, Munduyat. Da, Tayago, Santamina, you move to Yadi, Devil to the Yaris. Rangel Dene, you shower mother, Devil Mena, you Tanya Chetumari, you more Sangiamari. Just like you do Yadi, Devil to the was. So this year in this any, you take things because that the then attack with Tinjungalim.
So, just as explained before, that one level of understanding the principle of dependent origination is in terms of cause and effect relations. How, if you don't want a particular set of consequences, then you have to tackle the causes and conditions that lead to that. And by understanding the principle of dependent origination and the causal relations, you will be able to sort out what needs to be avoided in order to avoid a particular set of outcomes or consequences. Now, we can push the understanding of the principle further.
If you think deeper level.
If you think deeper, then the principle of dependence, goes
our
beyond.
Intelligence utilized for deeper level.
Then the principle of dependence goes beyond just cause and effect relations. It suggests a much deeper level of interconnectedness and interdependent reality, which is, for example, although in terms of temporal sequence, effect depends upon the cause and not the other way around. But if you think more carefully, the very concept of cause takes into account its relation to an effect, because without there being a cause, you cannot without a result or effect, you cannot refer to something as being a cause, because that doesn't make any sense. So in this way, we can see that our concepts are all contingent, that they already presuppose a network of relationships. So once you understand that, then you understand principle of dependent origination in terms of mutual dependence as well. So for example, we have all these kind of contingent concepts and terms like self and other, mountain on this side and a mountain on that side, the agent, the act, the action itself, and the agent, the object of the action and the act. So we see how...
And generally, positive, negative also relative. Good and bad also relative. But absolutely.
So whatever concept we may bring up, we always have to define it in relation to something. So you cannot pick up something and say, this is the absolute, and this is the absolute reference point. So whatever concept we come up with, there is a relational dimension to this.
Yeah. So that's why you see, one time my close friend, one Christian monk, he very much interested about Buddhist sort of the practice of samadhi or single-pointed mind or these things. He very fond, and also certain method to promote tolerance, forgiveness, these things. So one day he also asked me the concept of the emptiness, and I told him, this is not your business, this is our business. Because I felt, you see, the concept of interdependency, that brings there's no absolute. Impossible exist absolute. So that may hinder his faith. So I mentioned like that. So it is true. Now, such level, the different sort of traditions, there are differences. Now, it is much better to keep one's own tradition rather than mixed. So, 다 때는 딱에 딘중기 랑문의 유여바 따야다 따와 신줄어디 세야디 탑시 디버도 메두가.
So in fact, it is only this level of understanding of dependent origination or interdependence and relational nature of things that will help us deal with the grasping at some notion of objective, intrinsic existence out there.
다디 타바두야체.
So this is in the
타바두야체.
so this is in the context of Nagarjuna's teaching, the primary method for attaining individual liberation.
다 샹든도 다 타바두야스긴디 샹든 차이 민두자네 샹든 제발라 샹 캄도 뭐바 지머치신 시 다가는 신기 캄도 뭐바도 참바지기 애니 추주 된 시에서 거 알아. 된제 인도 시시시발로 파도 집에 집어디 개진 또래서.
So now, in relation to seeking the universal liberation for the benefit of all beings, since that altruistic motive is the main driving force, therefore it requires on the part of the person to have much greater understanding of the needs and the context and so on of helping other sentient beings. So therefore, in addition to the afflictions, one also needs to overcome all the subtle imprints and dispositions of obscurations that the mind may possess.
자, 다들 인도 다 디세야게 당에 되게 들려서 다도 좀 되게 샹왕도 예 티시도 두지기 동에서 찾아래. 다 동에 숨버지. 두지기 동에를 다 줘야리야. 바도 다는 더블시야게 뜻이 뒤판에 다 넣어야지다. 대용알이야 러스문냐면 띵징을 넣었다. 대용을 추중을 넣어 러스문냐면 더 내용과 계속 부진 넣어서.
So sorry. So in relation to the kind of dealing with the grasping itself, it is as explained.
You need very powerful wisdom which understand absence of independent existence. Now, in order to gain sort of very sound experiences, you need single-pointed mind, the mindful mind. That is samadhi. In order to practice that, you need tenshigdo.
So you need a very strong faculty of mindfulness and meta-awareness.
The initial sort of
Practice.
Way of practice or increasing these is self-discipline. That's it.
And this is where morality comes into the picture, or ethical discipline.
So up to here, the Sanskrit tradition as well as the Pali tradition, almost exactly same. And your presentation, mainly, see, Four Noble Truths, on that part. Now, Tamatashi Kundoba said, Tamatashi Kundoba said, that Nalanda Rangata tradition journey, the Chevy, not the Shendu. The Tamatashi Kundoba said, Yu Rangshi, Chishim Bisheba, something Michoa. 유쟁기 땡기 그 남도 유여지 디디 다 시습지 쳐야지 다 될 인탄적된 거야.
So going back to Aryadeva's 4 lines, he says, in the end, one must let go of grasping to all views. So here, His Holiness was saying that as he would understand that it is at that stage, it's not enough simply to have the correct understanding of the view of Anatman, but in fact, one must also have a deeper understanding of the very nature of mind itself, the subjective experience. And here, the teachings of Vajrayana becomes relevant.
냐라 산제 주지기 주캄 디시님 무사야지 제시베샤라 나도 패진 줘야.
So here, for example, in order to fully
디시님 차상 셔야야 나도 줘야.
in order to fully understand the deeper meaning and the whole implications of the teachings on Buddha nature,
Tathagata Garva,
the Tathagata Garbha, the essence of Buddhahood,
or Sugata Shindeya.
one has to take into account the perspectives of the Vajrayana tradition.
다 다들이 돌람 간에 서줄람만 돼야지.
So if we present the path purely in terms of non-Vajrayana tradition, then one speaks of the 5 paths and the 10 levels.
딱 왔더니 실현님이 나라. 대하다 가데 파라 삼가데 부디 사와스. 송시 디데데스. 송시 바로도 송시 바로 양다고 송시 정주도 시수.
So this process is captured in the famous mantra, which is at the end of Heart Sutra, Tathayatha, which means it is thus. Gade, gone beyond and gone and ground in the experience of enlightenment.
So they're Lama chapter.
So these are correlated to the 5 stages of the path.
담봉구수 통신 비절다 택신 공원 제님 다 택신 통람 탑에 사주남 샤트 되는 거야.
So once, according to the Nalanda tradition, once the individual has gained direct realization of the truth, emptiness, then from that point onwards, the 10 levels of the Bodhisattva bhumi or Bodhisattva stage comes into the picture.
That is Mayana, Sutriyanas, the way of explanation, or way of the path. Of course, the big one is the tremendous sort of enthusiasm to serve others, to develop immense sense of concern of well-being of infinite sentient being. And in order to do that, firstly, you yourself should have some kind of ability. Otherwise, you can't do. So it is required to sort of gain more sort of more energy, more wisdom. So that's enlightened state, that's Buddhahood. So now, in order to serve infinite sentient being, you should acquire certain your own qualification, capacity. So that we call Buddhicitta.
So this is awakening mind or bodhicitta, which aspires to attainment of enlightenment for the benefit of others.
So that mind are really immense helpful. Of course, I have no sort of complete sort of experience, but I have keen interest, and as I think the other day I mentioned, my daily main practice is cultivating the infinite altruism, and with help of understanding of the ultimate reality. How it helps means the realization or understanding of ultimate reality, then you can feel the root cause of suffering, ignorance, can be eliminated. So once at least you get some kind of feeling about the possibility of elimination suffering, then enthusiasm comes. Otherwise, it's just wishful thinking. Pray. Nothing happened. So that's the way. So the practice of meditation of shunyata and meditation of bodhicitta, these 2 things are extremely useful. So that's my main practice. So I can assure to you, if you make some sort of effort on daily basis with fuller picture of these things, you can transform your mental state. Not within one day or within a minute. It may take eons, but at least you see the joyful life then start. If that start, 대외 경례 근세에 and Chengzhu Semji Dashan, then and there, Semshi Sushi Gilu Yusa, Babalik.
So then you can get a sense of strong courage, for example, as expressed in Shantideva's Bodhicharya Avatar, where he says that thus overcoming all forms of weariness, one should ride the horse of bodhicitta, awakening mind, and travel from a place of joy to another place of joy. And what discerning person wouldn't want to embark on such a journey?
So then those prayer, is so long space remain, so long sentient being remain, I will remain in order to serve. This is not empty word, but some kind of enthusiasm, voluntarily. That really brings inner strength. And also, of course, I never say I have these sort of spiritual sort of realization. No, never say. I never say. I never pretend I'm a holy person or some great practitioner. No, never. But at least I have some. I think my experience a little above zero. So even that, very, very helpful. When I feel a little bit tired, when I feel some useful, some meaningful day, then the tiredness immediately is gone. Very, very helpful, very helpful. So I think much better become billionaire, then become billionaire. Billionaire, much worry. I think much stress, isn't it? This kind of the
experience.
The mental thinking, slight experience come, really makes you different. Wonderful. So please don't concentrate wholly on money. Think about our inner value. Very important. Now, so 다디 가서래 되기 럽대하기 지세만데 로이 그게 다 가서 그 유전 기땡네 다 남도 여지 지금 과야 탑시지 여러 있나 다 탑시 쳐봐야지 다 되라 나란지 니진일이 쳐야 나라 세두기 내급직도 밀음기 내급직도 니두기 내급직도 제 가르다 된 것은 시가 차라요 때문에.
So earlier I explained that it's not simply adequate to have a kind of an understanding of the ultimate nature of reality about the objective world, but also it is important to have a deeper understanding of one's own subjective experience, and particularly understand how thoughts arise in us, and how and find a way in which these conceptual thought processes can be calmed down, and explore, are there methods by which we can bring about the cessation of these kind of conceptual thought processes. So here, the explanation on how the consciousness during the waking state and the dream state and the deep sleep states differ. And what this suggests is that the fact that we have different states of consciousness in our existence indicates there is a levels of subtlety in our experience of consciousness.
I think everybody have this sort of experience. In dream, it's just some sort of experience, anger, or sort of what's the compassion. Then after you
wake up,
still some sort of impact.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you know, that's dream, but still some effect. So that shows a little bit subtler sort of mind. The impact on our whole view, quite strong. So therefore, the Nagarjuna stated, according to Hisamanza, based on Hisamanza, Nagarjuna concluded Shiduji Kusum. Shiduji Kusum Satele, Seduji Kusum. Niduji, that's Seduji Kusum. Niduji Kusum. Shiduji Kusum Shatudo.
So Therefore, in Nagarjuna's text, he actually speaks of these
다
three.
나가르주네 르마
Yeah.
아리안데베 주디.
So this is, for example, in the text called The Five Stages by Nagarjuna and Aryadeva's Compendium of Practices, in which they speak of these three, not only there are these three stages of consciousness.
데듀 구숨, 람듀 구숨, 시듀 구숨. 시듀 구숨라 세듀 니듀 에가 치듀.
So, and these explanations are made, for example, in the context of a result. You know, one speaks of the dharma, the three embodiments of a fully enlightened being: Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. And on the path, there is a corresponding equivalence of these three kayas. And in the ordinary state, you have the dream, the waking state, the dream, the deep sleep state, and also at the point of death, during which you have different states of consciousness.
So he clearly sort of explained the relation. There are some similarities. So he just used to give the name. It's three kayas in daily basis, and three kayas when you gain some sort of experience, deeper experience, then final sort of Buddhahood. So that's a Tantrayana. So the main method is dissolution of grosser level of mind. In order to dissolve grosser level of mind, the technique is try to shiva yogic lunginduba chukchumba.
So the technique involves trying to reduce the force of vayu, which give rise to the proliferation and activity of the mind and thoughts.
So here, you see, the yoga practice also involve the breathing control or all these. Although I learned these things, but I'm rather lazy, so occasionally I do. Otherwise, I don't do that. Not on daily basis. In any way, through that way, now they utilize innermost subtle sort of consciousness or clear light. That transforms into wisdom. That's a very, very powerful antidote. All the negative emotions. And emotions,
imprints of the afflictions.
So then, finally, achieve Buddhahood. That's the practice of Nalanda tradition, the Hinayana, the Pali tradition, Sanskrit tradition, and Vajrayana tradition. And simultaneous practices remain, become a bhikshu, so practice of Hinayana, essence, then some samadhi and these things, and then on top of that, practice of bodhicitta and practice of
compassion, universal compassion.
And shunyata, and then on top of that, visualization of deity and mandala. So that's all these three kayas, three yanas, simultaneously practiced on daily basis. So that's the
essence of
that's
the essence of the Nalanda approach, Nalanda tradition.
So that's my presentation. Now I fulfill my Mataji's instruction. Okay. I'm really sorry. Much time consumed. Thank you. Sorry.
No, thank you, your leaders.
Yes,
it was indeed very enlightening for us, I think. And I'll now request Dr. Wolfsinger to give his remarks.
Your Holiness, I will be very, very short. I think there is very little to be added after this profound analysis. I think we have returned to the roots here in India of one of the great systems that try to understand the world. But it is not the only one. There are other ones, there are other belief systems, there are other techniques. And as you said, in order to recognize reality as it really is, you have to look at different perspectives. And what you do in order to explore your mind and you try to see it from different perspectives, we now, I think, have to do it at a global level. where we see those different systems come together or still exist in parallel. But we have to take their perspectives, respectively, and see what they see, and try to find out whether I think we have the strong belief, otherwise we wouldn't come together, that there is only one world, which can be looked at very different angles. And you sometimes come to different conclusions about the nature of the world. If there is only one world, then there must be a synthesis. And of much of what you said,
Synthesis.
there must be a common denominator to which we finally will all be able to agree. If this is not the case, then, well, that's kismet, fate. Then it was not well done, the whole system. It's not our fault. But let's hope that it is like that. And then I think we have an equivalent in the West to what you consider secular ethics, and this is humanism, which is also a philosophical construct that is trans-religious, tries to get away with the religious idiosyncrasies, and much of what the humanists are saying is conformed with what you postulate. So I think there is, below the level of individual religions, a way to communicate. And we should get those scholars together rather than representatives of the different churches and sub-churches and so. But what we need is a translation system. You, because of your internal explorations, have created a reality that is not present in the West. We have no words for it, we have no experience with it, so we need translators who are at home in both worlds and can find the bridging theories between those experiences and then see how far we get. I think we are at the beginning of something, and I wish us all that this will be successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'll now request Richie Davidson, and the last word will be from Dr. Matthew.
Thank you. I will be very brief as well. Your Holiness, this was, I think, a pivotal meeting for us together for Mind and Life. As you know, we held a meeting in Europe in April in Zurich, and you have requested a meeting in Asia for many, many years. And we thought about Japan and other Asian locations, and when you initially suggested Asia, we never envisioned having a meeting in India. And I think that meeting here has been so important and meaningful since, as you have so beautifully articulated, the Nalanda tradition really has its strong roots here and has been so influential in our own thinking. And as part of that tradition, you have been such a forceful advocate for incorporating science in the monasteries to broaden the training of young monks. And I think that going forward, we need to think about the implications of what it is that we've considered at this meeting. And I look forward to the day when the academies of higher learning here in India, places like the Institute of Advanced Study in Bangalore and other such prestigious institutions, and also institutions in Europe and the United States that are comparable, follow your lead. And in our case, to teach contemplative traditions and practice within the intellectual institutions, to complement your aspiration to have science taught in the monasteries. And I think that this is something that will be so important going forward. One of the other, I think, amazing opportunities that we've learned about here in India is that there are already applications of teaching contemplative practice, for example, in education. We've learned while we were here about wonderful programs going on here in Delhi in the embassy school and elsewhere in India. None of these programs currently have research that is actually evaluating the impact of these programs, and I think that there is a wonderful opportunity that has been catalyzed by this meeting to encourage research which will help to establish these programs in a more substantial way and broaden their impact throughout India as well as throughout the world. And I think that India can really become a model for how this might be done. I also can envision joint visits of government funding agencies. In the United States, there's a component of the National Institute of Health that is providing important funding for meditation research. And I think that going forward, I can envision those groups coming together with similar groups in India and elsewhere in the world. And finally, I think that we have operated on the conviction that health is not simply the absence of illness, that well-being is something more than just the absence of disease. And Mind and Life, I think, can be a force in the world for scientifically based promotion of real well-being, genuine eudaimonia. And I very much look forward to the time in the near future when mental training is regarded in the same way as physical training or physical exercise is today. And I think, Your Holiness, you've been such an inspiration in helping to move that agenda forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Richie, for articulating it so beautifully. I'll now request Matthew.
Yes, also myself now spend 40 years in the Indian subcontinent, more than in my country and what I will ever spend in my country. So I also feel like an Indian Shela. And just two small points that I take from a few days together. And about the secular ethics, if some people feel uncomfortable, sometimes we speak of universal values, but universal is a little bit also a sort of vague. So Your Holiness often speak of fundamental levels of humanity. So fundamental ethics is about what? You often say, fundamentally, I'm a human being. Then, in my case, I'm born in France. Then I became a Buddhist monk in the Tibetan tradition. All those are superimposed level, but fundamentally, I'm a human being. So fundamental ethics about the value that pertains to all human beings, and even, I would say even more, to all sentient beings, because if we have to speak about ethics, we cannot ignore the well-being and the suffering of other species as well. So it's really this aspect of fundamental ethics can be commonly shared without any idea what secular means as opposed to religion. It's about fundamental value of what all sentient beings are aspiring to. Now, the second small remark is about science. People say science goes well with spirituality or not, are they antagonists? So it's all about what we mean by science. And Your Holiness, you have said that the Buddha said that we should examine his teachings and we should examine reality like examining gold by rubbing, melting, beating the gold to see if the gold is pure. So that's really the purpose of science, open, pragmatic, investigating mind. So the only thing that could differentiate is the domains of investigation. So it is true that natural science have mostly looked to the outside world, but they also have to look at the very fabric of reality with physics and quantum physics. Now psychology is also looking at the inner workings of the mind. So it is true that the classic Indian tradition have put an extraordinary emphasis on understanding reality from the subjective perspective, from the phenomenological perspective, both what it means of reality in terms of how sentient beings perceive reality according to the way their consciousness is, and to understand the ultimate nature of mind. But the rigorousness, the honesty, the logic, the reasoning that goes behind that investigation is definitely can be scientific in the sense of a rigorous pursuit of truth. So it's of course not goes well with blind faith, with presupposition, and so forth, but a more deeper definition of science, there's no such conflict. And I think in that sense, we can keep that in mind, that we are all empirically looking for a reality and a better understanding of which will help us not only to expand our knowledge, as you mentioned, but also to contribute to society on our personal path to flourish and possibly and hopefully some point to achieve enlightenment.
His Holiness Matthew Ricard has synthesized everything so beautifully. And now the last remarks will be by Professor Ramamurthy.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama Ji, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I am a hardcore scientist. I must thank the organizers, particularly the Mind Life Institute, for giving Niyaz the opportunity to join you and co-sponsor this particular event. Understanding the mind has always been a challenge to the humanity, for maybe since time immemorial. In the past, the traditional scholars have been looking inwards. That's the only way of investigating the mind and understanding. Knowledge generation is always coupled with inward looking. Modern science has been looking from outside. This is the one which has differentiated the modern science and the traditional science. It is unfortunate that the two systems have not been complementing each other, but actually have been looking at with a little bit of distrust. And there are reasons for this kind of distress. Of course, lack of understanding of the holistic manner, and more importantly, the way in which modern science had developed. Modern science over the last 400 years or 500 years have been developing on the basis of observe and analyze. If you can't observe, then it is not true knowledge. And there is also another underlying assumption that the observer has nothing to do with the observing process. So, if the same experiment is repeated in 10 different places by 10 different people, it must give the same result. Now, this has created a situation that anybody who doesn't follow this is not necessarily doing the right thing. And that's one of the reasons for the distress. The second reason, in my view, for the distress is last century had brought a series of sophisticated instruments, thanks to science and technology. To such an extent, the instruments have become more important. And if you don't use that instrument, you are not doing the right thing. So this is another reason for this distress. From the other side, as was mentioned earlier, the traditional knowledge system has got somehow coupled with the religious systems. The knowledge system does not imply religion, but unfortunately the common man thinks the religion is the one which goes with it. I always say, for example, when we were young, if you want to go to a Unani doctor, you must be a Muslim. Now we understand that that's a medical system. It has nothing to do with what you do in the prayer room or inside the house. But there was association, close association, which has also created a problem. I'm glad you said that today we need to look at beyond the religions in one holistic manner. Well, there are good signals. This distrust is slowly giving way to trust for various reasons. One of them is, of course, the scientists themselves are understanding, the modern scientists are understanding that the observation separation is not complete. The world is not deterministic, it is probabilistic. And if you don't understand something, it does not mean it is wrong. So this is one realization of 20th century science. The second, of course, is second, of course, is the recent development in neurosciences, Dr. Vijayalakshmi is here, Dr. Wolfinger is here, they are definitely telling us that yes, you may be almost right when you say the brain is a big computer, but that's not the end. The brain to mind journey is far more than what we understand now, and it is not possible to characterize everything in terms of the material world alone. You know, at one time people used to say human being is 80% water, 20% organic materials like oxygen, hydrogen and nitrogen, and a little bit of trace elements thrown in. We know very well this is stupid. It is not right. And if you want to create, if you want to create life as such, we don't have all the ingredients in hand. This also has made the modern scientists a little more humble than what they were maybe 50 years before. And this now this trust which is being built over the last few decades, I'm glad events of the type which is taking place now is trying to mobilize the two communities together and build on the trust so that each benefits from the other's developments. In particular, I am definitely of the view that while we need to disentangle the functional religious dogmas from the fundamental knowledge about the human beings, it's also important that the developments which are taking place in the modern science in terms of instruments and methodologies, it should be made available to the community of the knowledge seekers at the fundamental level. I have a few specific suggestions to make. Yes, it is important that the gurus meet and discuss among themselves what is common between them. But it is not enough if this knowledge does not disseminate to the not so senior people, particularly the younger people, because they are the ones who are going to make tomorrow, not the people of today. Yes, we need to bring and send this message into the younger community much more.
Yes.
You don't see them here, not many of them. So my first requirement, I believe, is that meetings of this kind have to take place on a regular basis in different locations, in different institutions, and the message should spread around that don't look at it in isolation, but look at it in a holistic manner. Dr. Vijayalakshmi was mentioning this, that we need to build the events of this type much more than what is happening today. Well, any event of this kind costs money. So if somebody has to go to some place and give a lecture, they will say, where is the resource? I remember in Department of Science and Technology, we used to have a theoretical physics seminar circuit. Some money is kept aside. If anybody has something to say, and if anybody is interested in listening to him, then scheme allows him to go there and make. Only one condition, you will not go to one place and come back. You will go to 5 places and come. 5 lectures you must give. I think we must build a seminar circuit like this in mind and life area, where people like Vijayalakshmi can go and talk. She will listen to with respect and sometimes a little bit of fear. But I think she should have an opportunity to go and interact with the youngsters, and youngsters should have an opportunity to call her and say what's happening and why is it happening this way. The second aspect is, nowadays social networks are becoming very popular. The social networks are there for any community of people. I'm not aware of a social network for the mind and life institutions, scientists.
Yes.
Make use of modern technology
to
build that network when you are not close by. You are thousands of miles away, but you are still together in your mind. I think we must make use of the modern technology to build this and enlarge this network. Of course, if you want to do research in this area, it again costs money. And generally, when you go to a funding agency, particularly if it is in the government, because I have been with the government for 40 years, first question is, what are the deliverables? What do you deliver? What do you give back in return? And nowadays they say, what is your contribution to GDP? Right?
Contribution.
And across the world, people talk about Millennium Development Goals. Now, look at these two terms, Millennium Development Goal and GDP. Does it ensure that the individual on the road will be more happy when the GDP is more? Does it ensure that if you give $2 a day, that will make him the most happiest man on the face of the earth? It doesn't. I've been asking some of my colleagues, can we add a component to GDP which does not relate to the money which he carries home, but his state of mind? Doesn't exist today. Is it enough to give $2 a day to make a man happy in Africa? No, something more needs to be done. And what is that more, and how do I quantify? Does not exist. So effectively, these questions are not being asked, and there are no answers. Now, government system depends on these numbers. So if you go and say, I'm going to look at Mind and Life cross-cultural research program, it may not be very easy to get money. So we need the support from people like you and others who are in a position to influence, to generate answers for such questions. How do I quantify the human happiness index, if you want to call it, and how do I convince the government that you have to invest on this? Otherwise, your GDP will grow, your problems will increase too, along with it. And we are seeing it already. Already I do see some. Today, if I ask somebody else, why are you looking at contemplative science or cognition science? Rajesh Kasurangan is sitting here. I have to justify why do I pay salary to him. I always say, well, you don't understand. That's why you have problems in Middle East. You have problems all over the world. If you understand the mind, many of these problems would have disappeared. Right. So you have to invest. This argument had to be taken forward so that there is a much larger interest of the decision makers on issues of this kind. These are some of the random thoughts which came to my mind. As I mentioned to you, I am a hardcore scientist, but I am not a blind hardcore scientist. I also keep looking at other things. So I am... I once again thank the Mind Life Institute for giving us an opportunity to be with you in this journey, and I assure you that we will continue to be with you in this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ramamurthy. I would now request His Holiness to just give some final remarks.
Nothing to say. I think one thing quite sure. I think this kind of sort of discussion, I think should continue. And as you mentioned, it's in different places, and if possible, eventually some university organize, and many students or graduates as well.
Graduates.
I think that's very important. Then also possibly some media people, also media people. Also, I think good to inform public. What is the sort of value? What is the sort of meaning, right?
No purpose.
And also now, I'm quite sure my sort of old, long-time friend, the scientist, I think now surely they realize India also is some kind of potential. And the atmosphere itself is something very favorable.
The cultural atmosphere.
So then, how to proceed these things? I don't know. Those people who have experience, now you should do. I don't know. Whenever you say my blessing or my support need, as I mentioned earlier, I'm disposal of you. So whatever you see, you carry some sort of plan. I will be, because of that.
Support, I'll support.
I always there. It is my duty to support, to serve. And if you want, you see, the more money, then don't ask me. Of course, you see, few millions Indian rupee that I can provide you. Then crores, that's difficult. That's all.
No.
I really appreciate all the participants, and especially those participants who firstly attended this meeting, including you and my Mataji. You see, they really, I appreciate you not only just physically attend, but also you really, they showing your involvement. That's very good. So thank you very much. And then future, I think this kind of work, I think definitely will, because of that.
Continue.
Because that will grow, definitely. Thank you. That's all. And then also, of course, the concerned people, organizer, they also, have the help immense. So I very much appreciate. Thank you.